Nostalgic gaming. That's one of the primary reasons as to why I collect these kinds of handhelds. These kinds of handhelds run different kinds of emulators on them, and emulation can get pretty tricky sometimes. Some handhelds make it easier than others, like the Steam Deck OLED. Steam Deck with Linux has a type of software that can organize emulation files for us and run emulation for us pretty easily. That software is EmuDeck. So with Linux softwares, especially on the Steam Deck, it's a lot easier setting that up compared to setting up some sort of Android handheld device and setting up the whole device yourself. So that's a Steam Deck OLED. But let's say we want something with less weight and we want to go with something with a smaller form factor. This has to have somewhat similar strengths as the Steam Deck in terms of emulation. So that leads to the Ayn Odin 2 lineup. Out of all these Android handhelds or those smaller handhelds from Anbernic that has their own dedicated software to them, the one that I see that yields the best result would be the Ayn Odin 2 Pro. I made a video about the Ayn Odin 2 Pro, and it's still what I considered one of the best emulation device out there. The Ayn Odin 2 Pro felt great in the hands, and as of today still feels great, and it ran all the games that I wanted to replay myself. The Ayn Odin 2 Pro was one of the best emulation devices right under the Steam Deck, and the only thing that the Ayn Odin 2 Pro was missing in terms of emulation was PS3 emulation. And that's not because of the power the Ayn Odin 2 holds, but software for the PS3 emulator just didn't exist for Android devices. Now, a year later, the Ayn Odin 2 Mini came out. It pretty much has the same internals as the Ayn Odin 2 Pro with the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, and almost all software related power is identical with the Ayn Odin 2 Pro. Only difference would be the screen, the form factor, and the battery size. So the screen being different being a mini LED screen, and also the form factor that closely resembles the PS Vita. And like the Ayn Odin 2 Pro, both perform very well. And then after the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, the Ayn Odin 2 Portal came out. So I got this pretty late, but I've been using it for the past 3 months now, and this definitely belongs in my top handhelds list. At first glance, this Ayn Odin 2 Portal looks amazing, premium, and well built. It's so nice to the point that I really don't want to take this outside to use without a case. But it still belongs in my top handhelds list, strictly for home use. So a little bit more about the Ayn Odin 2 Portal. You guys have probably already seen many reviews about the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, and probably already seen a lot of real life experiences with the Ayn Odin 2 Portal. But from what I know, the internals of the Ayn Odin 2 Portal is very similar to the Ayn Odin 2 Mini and the Ayn Odin 2 Pro. Essentially the same internals with the same processor of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, runs all the games that I needed to play. There's no difference between the three of them when it comes to emulating any games under Nintendo Switch. The games that work on here are also the games that works on the Ayn Odin 2 Mini or the Ayn Odin 2 Pro. But the differences between the three of them would be the screen, the form factor, and the ergonomics. Ergonomics with the Ayn Odin 2 Mini closely resemble the PS Vita, so these two handhelds really don't have great ergonomics to them, but it still looks like a really nice piece of tech. So I'm not going to go into the Ayn Odin 2 Mini just because I did make a video about it before, but with the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, that screen is an OLED panel with a 1080p 120Hz display. That just looks amazing, especially when I'm playing any higher fidelity games. It really helps with game streaming. It really does make everything feel more premium just using this device, especially for Android gaming. Now, these handhelds aren't just for emulation, but also for gacha gaming. Well, Android games, anything on the Google Play Store, essentially, because this is still an Android device. Now, because of the screen and the power, the games just run beautifully. If you take a look at this, all the effects in Wuthering Waves at the highest setting, and it still looks amazing. And when you're streaming games as well, it definitely takes advantage of that 120Hz OLED screen. So the Ayn Odin 2 Portal by itself ergonomically already feels great. It does feel a little bit small, so to make the grip feel even better, I really do suggest getting the Ayn grip case with the device. It's just a silicone case. It gives you extra grip at the bottom so you can hold the device a lot better and a lot more comfortably. Now, pricing wise for the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, it's not too bad. Under $500 for a device that lets you emulate pretty much any old retro game up to Nintendo Switch.
Whoa, what happened in Mudkip?
But Nintendo Switch has some caveats. And you can also emulate PS3 too, but you just have to run a different software on Ayn Odin 2 devices. The Ayn Odin 2 Portal, to me, is pretty much a well all-rounder device. Being quite honest with you guys, I do use the PS Portal mainly to play gacha games. So anything like Zenless Zone Zero, or Wuthering Waves, or any other future Android games that you can get from the Google Play Store really changes the gaming experience when you're playing it on the Ayn Odin 2 Portal. Because of the screen being 120 Hz, it really does take advantage of those higher fidelity gacha games. And when it comes to emulating PlayStation 2 games or GameCube games with those widescreen hacks, I do use the Ayn Odin 2 Portal for that as well. But when it comes to anything like Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, or any of those smaller handhelds like the DS, I would use something like original hardware, or even smaller devices like the Anbernic RG35XXSP, or even the Retro Pocket 5. And when I want to take things out on a smaller handheld, I do resort back to the Ayn Odin 2 Mini, or even original hardware like the PS Vita itself. Now, the big question for you guys out there with no handhelds at all, but you want to get into emulation, is this worth it? Probably not. It is under $500, but it's over $300. If you're looking to get into this device thinking it's one of the top strongest devices when it comes to emulation, just for Nintendo Switch emulation or any other strong handhelds for Nintendo Switch emulation, it isn't actually worth it. Nintendo Switch emulation has stagnated over the years ever since Nintendo itself has shut down multiple other emulation teams like Yuzu, and I heard Ryujinx, but I think it's still there. Not quite sure. So it really doesn't make sense for you to grab the Ayn Odin 2 Portal or even any other strong handhelds for Switch emulation just so you don't get the Nintendo Switch 2. At that point, just get the Nintendo Switch 2. But if you get any of these devices, especially the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, for emulating anything under Nintendo Switch, such as Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, 3DS, DS, GameCube, PS1, PS2, PSP, then you might as well not get the Ayn Odin 2 Portal and get something cheaper, like the Retro Pocket 5. Only reason being, the Ayn Odin 2 lineup in general, between these three devices, they're very high-end, strong, powerful devices. But the emulation softwares that exist as of right now don't really take advantage of that power. At this point, any bugs and glitches that you run into for any of these handhelds, it's because of the emulator itself and not the handheld. That's why I can still recommend the Retro Pocket 5 for anyone that wants to dip their toes into emulation, or even try starting playing around and tinkering with handheld devices to do emulation, or even the Retro Pocket Flip 2. Now, I don't personally have the Retro Pocket Flip 2, but I've heard many great things about it. So I can only imagine that if it runs pretty much the same as the Retro Pocket 5, then yeah, any games that you decide to emulate and some Nintendo Switch games, it would work on the Retro Pocket 5. And at the price of $200, yeah, this is way more worth it than the Ayn Odin 2 Portal. And for the people that already have the Ayn Odin 2 Mini or the Ayn Odin 2 Pro, and at this point is still considering again the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, I don't think it's worth it for that upgrade, because essentially the Ayn Odin 2 Portal, Pro, Mini, they all have the same internals. They are high-end premium top-tier emulation devices at very high price points. And they would be considered endgame emulation devices for most people. But there's always cheaper alternatives than going for something this high-end, like the Retro Pocket 5 or the Retro Pocket Flip 2. Let me know what you guys think about the Ayn Odin 2 Portal in the comments below. Would you guys go for it? Or are you guys done spending so much money on these high-end devices just to emulate some retro games? Alright, a great way for you guys to help out this channel is to share this video to a friend that's looking to continue their handheld collection, or a friend that's looking to see if the Ayn Odin 2 Portal is even worth it when it comes to stepping foot into the emulation world. Give this video a like and subscribe. Thanks guys. Peace.